And welcome to the Starting 11. I am Will West alongside my partner in fashion crime, Chris Carroll. Although today we're styling and profiling, Chris. I'm wearing the shirt, the Spurs shirts. You were wearing the Wolves shirt. How are you today, Chris?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Will. Some would say this is a fashion crime, but yeah, thought I'd fly the flag. Yeah, very good.
Got to support the team. So look, my name's Will West. I've been sports radio host for about 16 years. Chris and I have done the Starting 11 on radio for about the last 3 years, and we've actually decided to take it to YouTube and podcast starting this season. Chris, tell the listeners or the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Chris Carroll, like Will says. I'm from Wolverhampton in England originally, born and bred there. So hence the Wolves shirt. You know, you have to support where you're born, the town where you're born. And I've spent largely my life playing and coaching soccer and between the States and England. So now I'm a dual citizen of the States and England. So yeah, love soccer. It's pretty much been my life and love talking about it. So yeah, here we are.
So what we're doing today is a little bit of a shorter version of the show. Top 3 points. It's called All 3 Points is what we call it. Top 3 topics in the world of association football or soccer, or whatever you would like to call it, depending on your locale. And we break down the top 3 points. All right, Chris, we start with point number 1. What Antonio Conte out at Spurs? What went wrong with Conte at Spurs? And who do you think? Let's start there. And then we'll get to who do you think that they replace him with? Why did it not work for Conte with Tottenham?
Not much went right, really, did it, for Conte at Spurs? And I think that Spurs are going for the quick fix. They've done it with Mourinho. They've done it now with Conte. They're both similar types of managers. They come into a club. They got one way to do it. It's their way or the highway, regardless of what players they've got, what style of players they have. And it's amazing. I can't believe that we're saying this about top level managers who don't have a plan B. That's just that one way. Well, I think that's what went wrong. Conte comes in. He brings in, first of all, the style doesn't suit Spurs traditionally. It's sort of sit back, catch them on the break, fast break, which looks great. And Spurs have got a handful of players who can handle that, but they don't have the defense to soak up wave after wave of pressure from the other club, from the other team, just waiting for that opportunity. So it didn't have the players. It wasn't successful. The Spurs crowd, the Spurs people like yourself, I imagine, didn't like the style, and so it never really worked. You know, Mourinho was close to winning a trophy, then he got the bullet, and it's not been a disaster for Spurs. I always say this: Spurs always look so close to being so successful because they've got it all there. They've got a handful of fantastic players. They've got that fantastic stadium. But it's just not worked, and he's just so stubborn, and he's blamed everybody else. He's blamed everybody but himself, taking no responsibility for it. And it's down to him. Let's be honest. I mean, it was his job to form the team, to form how they play, to set the team out, and it's not worked for him.
Yeah. Look, I think when they brought Conte in, because every Spurs fan has had those supporters had the same beef with Levy over the years. He's not going to spend. He's not going to spend. He's not going to spend. They brought Conte in, and I think we thought, okay, they're finally going to spend. And they did, but they did it incrementally. They didn't make the big splash that needed to happen to be able to fill the roster completely out. So you bring in Conte. He likes to run wingbacks. You don't go get him wingbacks until the second season at the January windows when you finally go get him wingbacks. And when they brought guys in, they brought them in. They didn't go get the center back that he wanted, and they need center backs in a bad way. And they brought in young guys on the cheap that are in their early 20s instead of bringing in 26, 27, 28-year-olds in their prime that you expect to win today. Conte expected them to do that. Mourinho expected them to do that. So they're trying to build the way Arsenal's trying to build. And Levy and I think the front office is and the board is. And then you have managers on the sideline that are expecting you to spend like Chelsea and City and Liverpool do. And Spurs just weren't willing to do that. So what you got was a marriage of the two that just didn't work. So you ended up with some type of mutation of partly let's spend money and let's bring in a attacking midfielder. Let's bring in a couple of wingbacks late. Let's bring in a wingback on the cheap. Things like that they tried to do that they never really chose one way or the other. I think that you can skin that cat multiple ways. You can win multiple ways in the Premier League. At some point in time, you are going to have to spend. and add to your team. And there's just a certain level that Spurs ownership was never, and the board was never willing to do. Levy was never willing to spend money like Liverpool spends money, like City spends money, like United spends money, like Chelsea spends money. He was just never willing to do that. And so it works if you look. It's great if you've got Arsenal and your best players, Bukayo Saka, and he's incredibly young, and so you can not pay him a lot. Harry Kane's at the back end of things, and so you're paying him a lot. You're paying Son a lot, and then you're surrounding him to keep that payroll low with a bunch of guys that just frankly aren't good enough to be in a Big Six club. And that's a little bit of what they did. They did bring in guys. You make a good point, Chris, about it not, everything just kind of went poorly for them because they dealt with a ton of injuries over the last year, over Conte's tenure with Spurs. But Conte also, when his team was healthy, look, some of the losses, the Villa losses on Conte that they had in January. I mean, that's absolutely on him. You can tell they didn't care where they're passing the ball. I have no idea. The Leicester City loss in February was the same thing. Just slinging the ball all over the place. My niece's ASO team, we would yell out if they were to try to play like that. So there wasn't a lot of intention to what they were trying to do with the ball on the offensive side. And part of that may be that he didn't have the wingbacks that he wanted to be able to create the way that he likes to create. He was unwilling to change. He had players playing out of position. They did eventually go spend for him. They just did it over a 1.5-year period. And Conte wasn't a guy that seemed like he was willing to be patient and let them spend over a 1.5-year period, or let them bring in 22-year-olds. And then by the time they're 24, these are going to be world-class players, or they have a chance to be if you develop them right. That's not what Conte was looking for. He wanted to win today, to win immediately. And what's interesting is if you look at the issue with Inter, he left Inter on mutual terms as well for kind of the same thing. He ripped the club publicly for not spending and not bringing in the type of players that he wanted. And I think that guys like Conte, guys like Mourinho, they're used to you going and dropping a ton of money to bring in the guys that they need so that they can have the most talent and they can win today and they can manage those personalities in the locker room. And that's how we'll win, as opposed to winning the way Arteta's winning right now with young guys that I've developed and they're going to hit their peak and we're going to be fantastic and world beaters. And maybe we can hold off a City team that spends more than double what we do. You tried to marry it. You ended up with a mutation. It didn't work. Conte burned the thing down last Sunday after the draw with Southampton. Look, he did not do a good job, but everything he said about Levy and the Spurs board was absolutely true. And a lot of what he said about the players is absolutely true as well.
You're right there. It is true. It is to a degree. It's true, and there are so many factors at play, aren't there? I mean, you mentioned the style of play and the way they played, who they bought, when they bought, because they did spend money, but it was over time, and it was a bit of a scattergun approach to who they were buying, and they weren't really. It wasn't the same. They didn't buy like Brighton buy. Or Bournemouth buy, and you can see, there's a bit of thought. It doesn't look like there's a bit of any thought gone into who they've bought, or what position they've bought, and they just sort of tried to plunge them into the team, and it didn't fit a system, and the way they played, there was no real identity. The way they've played, one week it looked great, next week it looked like you say, looked like they couldn't string 3 passes together. So there was no identity there. So nothing ever gelled at all. But there was enough spent on the team so Levy could go, well, I spent money, and then Conte can still say, well, I didn't get the players I wanted because they weren't the superstars that Conte wants. He wants them immediately, and he wants the best players just to go out and win straight away. So it was never going to be a rebuilding job, this. And it seems like that you wonder what the conversation was like at the interview stage when Conte was recruited, because the marriage just never happened.
Okay, so I've seen a lot of people say Conte knew what he was getting into when he took Spurs' job. I will tell you this: Spurs fans, Spurs supporters thought that we're finally going to spend if you're bringing in Conte, which is true. Do you think that Spurs fans were just probably, I don't know, like a little too optimistic that the board was going to spend? Or are you kind of like a lot of the other people who've written about this who say Conte had to know what he was getting into? Mourinho knew what he was getting into when he went to work for Daniel Levy.
Well, you'd think both sides would know what they were getting into, wouldn't you? And that's what I mean. What happened at the I won't call it an interview, but the talks between the two of them? Conte would obviously say what he wants. Levy would, you'd think, and he did. He delivered on money. But who was doing the recruiting? Either recruiting that was wrong, because there was a decent amount of money spent, It wasn't all immediate like Conte would have probably wanted. So it's hard to know. It's hard to tell. And as Spurs fans, you would think that all those boxes would be checked before anyone shook hands and signed a deal. But it doesn't. It seems like the deal was signed, and then the two parties went different ways, and everyone's surprised it doesn't work. It was a weird one.
Okay, so where does Spurs go from here? If you're, in your opinion, who are the top candidates? Who should they go after? Who will they land?
Well, I think I'm surprised they haven't already got Nagelsmann sorted out from Bayern Munich. He's just lost his job there. Fantastic young manager. Just because he's young doesn't make him fantastic, but he's a developmental coach. He can be part of a project. He's done great. He's done a great job with where he's been. Bayern Munich still in there. It's a strange one that he got fired, to be honest with you, because he's what is he, a point off? He's in second place in the Bundesliga, or he was with Bayern Munich, point off, top place, still in the Champions League. He gets fired. He is adaptable. He's what Conte isn't. He likes to play a number of different ways. He plays whatever suits the players that he's got, so which would be common sense, quite honestly, wouldn't it? But hey, so much for common sense. But yeah, for me, he would be the guy, and I'm surprised they haven't snapped him up already.
Yeah, it looks like there are beliefs that they're going to wait till summer. I think you may end up waiting too long, and Nagelsmann takes another job. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to be Nagelman that gets that job. I have a concern. Listen to a couple podcasts from guys who cover Bayern, and I guess there were stretches where it was very similar to Conte, where, wow, you look fantastic, and then you just had stretches where are you passing the ball? What are you trying to do offensively? And that was a little bit problematic. But the one thing that he brings to the table that Mourinho didn't and Conte didn't is when you lose the ball with Nagelman, you try to get it back immediately. Like, right, you're going to press high, and that's something that Spurs just need to do. They have to do that. You have your best players are built for that. That's how they came up playing under Pochettino. That's the other guy that a lot of people are pointing to as saying, okay, what about Pochettino? And do you think that Pochettino could be an option for Levy this summer, and maybe we get the band back together, minus Christian Eriksen?
He could be. I think Pochettino, if he could have that final again, that Champions League final again, he'd do it differently. And I think that was he played that wrong, and then the wheels sort of came off. He could be. I'm never usually one for going back. I think I'd probably steer clear, to be honest with you. He wouldn't be a bad bet. He'd be probably a second bet because he does know the club. But Nagelman, he does, like as you say, he plays good attacking soccer, high press, win the ball back. That's where Spurs' strength is, in that top third of the field, in that attacking third of the field. Pochettino, I mean, he wouldn't be a disaster. Whether he'd want to come back, I don't know. And I think he'd be welcomed back by the Spurs fans. So, yeah, it could work out. It wouldn't be a bad second option.
What you said about Nagelman's true. It's why I think he's going to be the guy. I think they sell Harry Kane this summer and bring in young players. And you're right, he's a developmental coach. And because of that, and the style of play that fans want to see, I think that it just works out too much. My only concern is that Levy and the board are going to drag their feet, and you end up losing him to somewhere else because he says, maybe I don't want to go to Spurs when I have other options, because we all know they are not going to. At this point, we know without question, as long as Daniel Levy draws breath on planet Earth, Spurs are not going to spend like a big club. They're not going to. And so Nagelman seems like the right guy for it, but if he gets an opportunity to go somewhere where they will spend, does he take that one? Apparently the knock on him is that he struggles to deal with the big personalities and to manage a lot of big personalities in one changing room. So maybe Spurs being young and he's better at developmental than he is dealing with big personalities, maybe it's a perfect match. Yeah,
there doesn't seem to be too much trouble in that changing room, does there? Kane seems to go with the flow. I'm sure he's no shrinking violet, but he does, he never causes any hassle. Son, the same. The big personalities. Richarlison is one you could see having his say in there. He hasn't really worked out either yet. Maybe a new coach will turn him around. So, yeah, I wouldn't think that would be too much of an issue. I don't think there's the big superstars like Ten Hag walked into Manchester United and had to sort out. So, no, I think I think he could go straight into there and start working with them.
All right, point number 2, Chris. Awards time. We're about 3/4 of the way through the EPL season. So here's what I'm asking you for: your manager of the year, your keeper of the year, your player of the year. Let's start with the manager. Who's the manager of the year in your opinion?
Oh, for me, it's got to be Brighton manager Roberto De Zerbi. It has to be. I know you high profiles. Arteta's done great at Arsenal, but what De Zerbi's done with Brighton, he's come in seamlessly. When Potter moved on, he just came straight in. No one had ever. I bet there wasn't a Brighton fan who knew who he was. But how do Brighton keep doing this with their players and the coaching staff? It's fantastic. Comes in. He's at Shakhtar Donetsk. Before that, he's coached at some lower, less prestigious Italian teams, and you hear all this talk about managers. It's often said, but he's got no experience in the Premier League, etc., etc. He had no experience in the Premier League. You never hear about him. He just gets on with it. Brighton are sitting. They're close to finishing in the top, the highest ever level that they've finished. They're in the semi-final of the FA Cup, and they're pushing for top 4. I think they're something like 8 points behind Spurs with 3 games in hand on Spurs. So I know that's a lot of ifs, buts, and maybes, but the fact is, with the players he's got, he's doing an unbelievable job. He's come in. He never makes a fuss. You never hear about him. So he's just getting on with his lot. And to me, that speaks volumes. That's a coach. That's a coach who can work with. That's a coach you want. Work with the players you've got and get results out of them. So yeah, he's my manager of the year.
I'll go with Eddie Howe. I just what he has done in Newcastle. I know they spent and brought guys in, but he made that team gel immediately, didn't he? And so to get guys from lower level teams from the MLS, for gosh sakes, and to make them, start not just quality players, but star players, world-class players at Newcastle of all places. And again, it's always been a big club, and a lot of that is that supporter base. Man, that supporter base is as good as any in football. But what he has done to be able to turn that team around so quickly and to get them gelling in on the same page, and they're still deficient. I mean, you can look at that roster and tell that they're still very deficient from a goal scoring perspective, yet they just don't seem to be going anywhere. So they're 2 points behind Spurs right now with the match in hand. I mean, my gosh, that's incredible. Maybe 2 matches in hand, actually. So it's incredible what he's done, Eddie Howe. What he did at Bournemouth was masterful, and he seems to be doing something similar with Newcastle right now. I will tip my cap to him. I think he's just been fantastic this year and has done as good of a job as anybody in the world. Your keeper of the year.
Keeper from that club, Nick Pope. They've conceded the fewest amount of goals out of anybody in their Premier League. I forget how many it is now. I have to look, but it's 19 all year. The next closest to that is Man City with 25. So Pope, he moved from where did he go from? Burnley to Newcastle. It's worked out unbelievably for him. It helps having a decent defense, but Newcastle aren't known for their world-class defenders, but they've got a good, solid defensive team that works well defensively. But you've got to have the keeper there as well. And a lot of it's down to him. A lot of the games with Newcastle play, and you look at the player ratings, Pope's right up there. So he's my keeper of the year.
Yeah, for me, look, if you just said, like, we're playing pickup and I can pick what keeper I want to, I'm going to say Pope 1, Allison 2. So don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this guy's the best keeper in the Premier League, but I think he's the one that's had the best season and been the most specifically impactful to his team. That's David Raya. I think David Raya has been unbelievable for Brentford. And part of it is he fits what they do. Now, not the most fundamentally sound guy. When I'm watching Brentford, I see it. There are many, many times that I'm like, Ray, hang on to the ball, Ray. You know what I mean? Why are you smacking everything down or fisting everything? You know what I mean? 3 rows deep. I don't understand why he does that, and I don't think he's the most skilled guy in the world, and he's undersized. But for what he's done with Brentford, no one has more saves than he does on this season, and he is masterful at drop kicking it. He is kicking the ball from in hand. When Brentford invites other teams to come on, and then they'll get going on the counterattack, and a lot of why they're so successful at that counterattack is because of the way that Reyes sets them up, but kicking the ball out of his hand and setting up and putting the ball into play in a place where someone can take it off the dribble immediately as soon as that kick gets to them. So just what a guy has done for specifically this year, I think that David Reyes had the best season of any keeper in the Premier League. Now, don't get me wrong again. I would take Nick Pope over anybody in the EPL right now. But I think what David Reyes has done, because he's constantly under assault, because of the way the Brentford sets up, that's also another reason why. He's given up some goals. He's somewhere, I guess, mid-pack as far as his goals given up. I think he's 5th or 6th. But he's clearly had far more saves than everybody else, about 10% more than any other keeper has had to deal with. And what he does to help them get into that counterattack, I'll say that David Reyes is the guy. Your player of the year so far, Chris.
So far, and I think it will be as long as things don't change, and there's no reason why they should. Martin Odegaard of Arsenal for me. I think Arsenal's been a revelation this season, and I think he's made them tick. He's been at the center of everything. He's the perfect midfield player that, in my book, he controls everything. He can stick his foot in. He can tackle. Not the toughest in the world. He's not known for his tackling, but he gets it done. But also his vision. He gets things moving forward. He looks to go forward early and quickly, and I love that about Arsenal. They don't waste sideways and backwards passing just for the sake of it. So he gets things going quickly, kind of quarterback style in the States. But then he doesn't just sit and let it go. He supports, and you'll find him on the edge of the box, running into the box late, getting on the end of crosses and pullbacks. And he scores his own share of goals as well. I think he's got 10 goals this season and something like 12 assists. So he's always in the middle of everything. He's orchestrating everything. And may well go on and be the captain of the Premier League winning team. So he's been a revelation. The team has, and he's been in the thick of it.
Okay, so it's kind of odd because I thought the player that I'm going to choose, I feel stupid not taking Haaland, but I think this guy's had the best season. It's Bukayo Saka. So I'll take another player from Arsenal, but a different player from Arsenal. Yeah. Part of it may just be the optics of when I see Arsenal, it does when they're not on the counterattack or something like that, and you see them take possession in the inside that attacking third. Sometimes they just throw the ball to Bukayo Saka and they say, go make something happen, and he does. Often they just say, Bukayo Saka, go make something happen by getting the ball to him on the outside, and he does it every time. So watching him use up some of the best defenders in the Premier League has been incredible, knowing as young as he is. He's also second in the league in assists and top 5 when it comes to goals. The guy's just been just utterly unbelievable. So I'll say it's Bukayo Saka. Neither of us chose Erling Haaland, though. Is there a particular reason you didn't choose Haaland? Because for me, Chris, I think that Haaland might be underutilized by City right now, and he probably would just be running away with the Premier League goals record, but City kind of doesn't look to pick him out or send a ball deep to just let Haaland chase it and dare everybody else to stop him.
Yeah, I think they're still getting used to each other, to be honest with you, Haaland and the rest, Haaland and the rest of the team. I thought perhaps a bit route one, going for the obvious Haaland. I mean, he's unbelievable. If you're saying forward of the season, absolutely just nailed on. It'd be him. Yeah, it's a close call. Saka was my other. He'd be in my top 3 as well. Probably those 3 that we're just talking about now be the 3 I'd go for. But yeah, Haaland, unbelievable. What a machine. Saka, fantastic. What a player. I mean, there are less and less players like this now. I swear there used to be more of them. I swear that every team had 1 or 2. When a player gets the ball, it's exciting. Everyone gets off the seat. Everyone edge of the seat. They're expecting something to happen, anticipating something to happen because he can make something happen. And and he's got his finished product now. He's scoring goals as well. He's not just running down blind alleys, And like I'm thinking of Traore at Wolves. He's another player. Makes something happen. He gets the ball. You think, yeah, something's going to happen, but it often doesn't end up in the back of the net. It often ends up somewhere else. But at least he has a go. But yeah, Saka, fantastic, and Haaland too. What a couple of players as well. But Odegaard for me would be the man.
Yeah, I look at Saka as a guy like a Sterling, like Traore, but a little more under control.
Yeah.
Right. And also he can play longer. Like Sterling's never been a guy that's going to give you all 90 minutes, and Saka can. Right. So that's one of the reasons that I went with him, just because of his ability to create for everyone else there, because he usually beats his man off the dribble, and then you have to adjust, and your defense has to get out of shape. It just does. Point number 3, Chris, Declan Rice. You mentioned this to me in a text message yesterday. Someone called Declan Rice limited, and I know a lot of people have ripped him for his fundamentals over the last few weeks. What are your thoughts on Declan Rice?
I like Declan Rice. He's a great player. Great player. He still seems young. He seems like he's only just started out, but he's in his sixth solid year now. I think the criticism from Graham Souness and Roy Keane, who are two legendary midfield players, Souness, Liverpool, Roy Keane, Man United, both in the heydays of both clubs, were that what he's lacking is his input going forward. Yeah, he sits a lot. And he's a modern day defensive midfield player, which if that's what you're looking for and nothing else, then great. He's your man. But what he doesn't do is contribute, and I think he could contribute more going forward as well. I'd like to see him contribute going forward, like Conte at Chelsea. He'll sit, he'll tackle, but he'll get things moving quickly forward, and he'll get on the end of passes, and he'll score the odd goal as well, Conte. So he's a modern day. You can't say, well, it's modern day soccer now, so he doesn't score. He's well behind in the goal scoring stats. I think he's just got 12 goals in 200 appearances for West Ham, which for a central midfield player isn't many. Those are the players that we talked about, Souness and Keane. They got something like 3 times the number of goals, and they could both tackle as well. So they were tough tackling, but they'd get forward and they'd score too. Another guy that came to mind, if you want to think of a sort of central going back, Jimmy Case played for Liverpool, tough as boots, tough as nails, and but he'd score goals, and he scored something like 3 times more, per game, if you look at it, per game than Declan Rice does. So yeah, he's great to sit in front of that 4. And if he's told not to move forward, by David Moyes, then really, because he's been this criticism, he's had a bit of back and forth with these two guys, and especially with Souness, but he hasn't said, look, I've been told not to get forward. I've been told to sit. Now, so if he has been told, then he needs to say, look, I've been told to do my job and just stay there. But yeah, he could do with getting forward a little bit more. If he's not, if more, I can't imagine really. West Ham are losing a defender. If they're not scoring goals anyway, that's probably one of the reasons. They play 4 at the back, West Ham, and Rice as well sitting there. So they got 5 there just sitting there. No wonder they're not scoring goals. So he does. If he wants to be considered a great midfield player for me, he needs to score more goals.
Yeah, and I would say this, or contribute to someone else scoring goals. One or the other, right? And maybe that's the issue, is they can't. There is no one for him to contribute to. But when you look at the numbers, and if you go through, I went through a lot of advanced after you sent me that last night, went to a lot of the advanced analytics sites. He is elite when it comes to interceptions, tackles, winning the ball back after losing the ball, things like that. He is elite. When it comes to anything to do on the offensive side or moving forward, he's in the 20th percentile. I mean, there are 80% of midfielders are better than he is at it. So right now he is limited, but part of that might be that he's only 24 years of age. And that's the portion of his game, especially under David Moyes, that's been underdeveloped. The other thought is that maybe he's a holding midfielder, not a central midfielder, not a central midfielder that gets forward. So maybe that's just what he is. The guy who he actually compares the most with, if you look at the other midfielders in the EPL right now, is Højbjerg. And he's faster than Højbjerg. I think he's a better athlete than Højbjerg. But it's very similar. I do wonder if he goes to a big club and they're expecting him to get forward, is he going to be uncomfortable like Højbjerg can be sometimes? He's a better dribbler than he is. He's not as good of a passer. It doesn't seem like this as Højbjerg. And Højbjerg has twice as many goals in the same number of times. In their last 100 matches, he has twice as many goals. So Declan Rice, I do wonder, are they right that maybe he is just a holding midfielder, or is he just young and under David Moyes, that's the portion of his game that hasn't been developed?
Well, the other thing that you've touched on there is that those guys who were mentioned, Graham Souness, these legends, Graham Souness, Roy Keane, Paul Scholes is another one, absolute legend. He used to, he'd tackle like a demon, but he'd score goals. They all played on successful teams that are going forward. They played in Man United and Liverpool, and it's easy to play. You're doing less defending, less defensive tackling. You're perhaps winning the ball on the, in the opponent's half, the right side of the halfway line, and then you're forward already. Rice is probably spending a lot of time having to defend deeper at the moment, just because of the way West Ham are, the West Ham situation right now. But I think it would be good if you did see him driving a little bit more. And yeah, Højbjerg, he's been playing forward a little bit more, getting in the goals as well, hasn't he, more lately? So yeah, he's 26. Maybe he's thought, I'll nail down this defensive stuff first, and then he's learning, because he's got to learn when the right time to go. When's the right time to go? When don't I go? But I think it'd be great to see him get forward a little bit more and support his midfield players.
And a lot of people think that he's going to be at Arsenal, right? There's a lot of talk that this summer Arsenal buys Declan Rice. If I'm Arteta, I feel more comfortable that he's going to fit his role because of the role that he's playing at West Ham than a lot of other guys. I mean, because it's not like Odegaard. It wasn't like everybody was knocking down the door to bring Odegaard in, right? So, and then he gets in the right spot or with quality teammates. There's plenty of times that I've watched Harry Kane there as a Spurs fan, and I'm just like, it's Kane, and especially when Son's been injured, it's either Kane and Son and nobody, or Kane and Son, or Kane's out or Son's out, and it's just Kane by himself trying to do things. And I'm just watching, thinking if they had the same talent around them that United has, or Liverpool has, Chelsea has, City has, I can imagine what those guys would be able to do. But you look at a guy like Grealish. I think Grealish is handcuffed a little bit being in City's system, and he's forced to play a role, and I think that can be tough for him, as opposed to just being a guy that goes box to box and does any and everything for a team. I don't think Declan Rice is a guy that goes box to box and does any and everything for a team, but I think he can fill a role very, very well, and he seems to do so without complaining or without causing problems. So if I'm looking at a big club dressing room, I kind of feel good about Declan Rice's ability to fit in at Arsenal right now.
He would. They've got Partey in there as well, so we'd have to put him out. I think he's really come on.
That's their replacement, I guess. They would think that, I guess, Declan Rice would replace Partey.
Yeah, if he needed to. I mean, Partey's been doing so well lately, and I don't know if he's looking to move on or if they're looking to move him on. Not sure how old Partey is. He's
29.
Old. Is he? Yeah. So so Rice has got some years on him, which would be a good trade. But maybe and also, I don't know. I think Arsenal will be looking. It would be a good fit. They'll be looking to bolster the squad. Hey, keep Partey and Rice. Why not have both of them? That would make sense.
All right, that's Chris Carroll. I'm Will West. Chris, fantastic job today, sir.
Cheers, Will, and you, mate. Good to be with you again.
We'll be back next Monday. This is the Starting 11. Again, like and subscribe. If you want to see more soccer content in your timeline, like or subscribe to the channel.